I want to just tell you a little bit about Nina. I know that there are some fans of hers here, but we were so fortunate to find Nina. She actually found us. She came forward a couple years ago and offered to give a film school talk on what turned out to be 3 different films. One was Casablanca, one was Singing in the Rain, and the other was Salt of the Earth. And she brought to our theater a great understanding of film history, the place that a particular film had in the history of filmmaking and in the history of the country, and you're going to get to hear about some of that today. This is all volunteer on Nina's part, so we should first of all thank her very much. She's going to speak for about 25 minutes before the film. Then we'll watch the film, and then we'll have a Q&A afterwards, so you can express your views and ask her about the film and other things that she said. I'm going to just stop talking and welcome you and invite you to enjoy film school with Nina Kleinberg.
Hi folks, welcome on this beautiful fall afternoon. Welcome to Out of This World, a look at classic 1950s science fiction. Now, as we journey back, I'm going to take you back to the 1950s. So I'm going to ask you all to please turn off your two-way wrist radios, your subspace transceivers, your Death Star communicators, any other devices you may have on your person here, because it's not 2016 anymore. Okay. It takes place not in outer space, and it doesn't have flying saucers. It takes place right here on Earth, and in plain old glorious black and white. It takes place in a small town in America. It could be any town. The town is called Santa Mira, but it could be any of 1,000 small towns all over the country in the 1950s. As I was doing my research, there has probably been more written about Invasion of the Body Snatchers and why it was made than just about any other science fiction film of its time. This film was shot in 3 weeks on a budget at less than $400,000, and yet it has become the iconic film of its era. And I have read I've read so many articles about this film. Some call it a left-wing film, and some call it a right-wing film. And I've read psychological interpretations and feminist interpretations, and I know of at least one sociology professor here in the Valley who uses it in his classes. So today, my goal is to have you see this film through the eyes of 1950s America. And I'm going to try the best I can to suggest why I think it still resonates as vibrantly today as it did 60 years ago. In many cases, maybe more vibrantly. So I'm going to talk for a little bit, and then we're going to show the film. And then I'm going to talk just briefly after the film about the original purpose, or the original concept that the filmmakers had when they made it, and how the studio made them change it to make it more palatable for the audience. And then, of course, as usual, there'll be time for questions and answers. And if I'm successful in my talk today, you will be discussing this film over dinner tonight. So let's get started. There's an old saying in Hollywood: if you want to send a message, use Western Union. And I suppose today you might say, put it on Twitter. The studios didn't want message movies. They wanted to make money, and they wanted to entertain people. And if a writer had something important that he or she wanted to say, they had to hide it as cleverly as possible. And I think that's one of the reasons that science fiction films work so well. They can introduce the impossible into the world of the real in a way that entertains and is also reflective of society. So as you look through the best science fiction films of the 1950s, certain themes stand out, and I want to talk to you about those themes because they're all present in today's film. One of those themes is the wisdom of children, because when something goes wrong in everyday life, it's usually the children who notice first. They don't bring to their experience of the world the preconceived notions of adults, and they accept what they see without editing.
Bobby, what are you doing up at this hour?
I couldn't sleep, Mom. I had to tell you.
Tell me what?
Well, after you left, I followed Mr. Carpenter. And where do you think he went? Right into the spaceship.
Now, Bobby, wait a minute.
Honest, Mom, I saw him. It opened up and he walked right in. And that big iron fellow was walking around, too.
Bobby, you've been dreaming again.
No, I haven't, Mom. Honest, I promise you, I saw him.
It usually helps if you're a curly-headed little boy with freckles.
Dad.
What is it, son?
Something lighted out beyond the trees. In the sand pit. A big bright light.
What?
Come on, it's out there now. I'll show you.
Didn't Mother ask you to stay in bed?
I did. I was asleep. It woke me up. There's a bright light that lit up everything, and Dad landed right out there.
You were dreaming. If a meteor fell, it would have wakened people up for miles around.
But it didn't fall. It landed. I saw it. I don't know what it was, Dad. A spaceship or something.
And here's what we're going to see, something very similar in today's film.
Hey, slow down now. Look, school isn't as bad as all that. It can't
School isn't what upsets him, it's my daughter-in-law. He's got the crazy idea she isn't his mother.
She isn't. Don't let her get me.
Nobody's gonna get you, Jimmy.
I'm not going home with him.
You're going to stay at your grandmother's house. Would you call his mother and tell her that?
No,
All right. Run along. Everything's going to be all right. You be a good boy now. Come on.
Good night, Doctor.
Good night.
The films of the 50s also had a lot to say about women. The ratio of men to women in most of these films is at least 4 or 5 men for each woman. And in most cases, the woman is basically there to be the love interest of the male character. The men transact the important business, and the women provide the distraction.
One by one, in spite of every safeguard, my co-workers were torn literally limb from limb.
By what?
By some devilish thing that never once showed itself.
And the Bellerophon?
Vaporized as the 3 remaining survivors tried to take her off.
And yet, in all these 19 years, you personally have never again been bothered by this planetary force.
Father.
Alta, I specifically asked you not to join us for lunch.
Lunch is over. I'm sure you never said a word about not coming in for coffee. Well, did you or did you?
Now, sometimes the woman is more than just a sex object. She's usually a scientist or some other highly trained professional, and she's just one of the guys.
We've already made the trip 100 times.
What?
In the training room. Yeah, I've done more flying this last month than I've done over 100 missions. And believe me, this is the hottest crew I've ever worked with. Especially in the brains department.
Yeah, very attractive, too.
Yeah, I agree. But you can quote me on this. Unless you look like a test tube or a chemical formula, you haven't got a chance.
From the woman's angle, Dr. Van Horn, how does it feel making a trip like this alone with 4 men? To tell you the truth, I never thought much about it. Tell me, Doctor, is there any specific reason why one member of the crew should be a woman?
I'd like to answer that, if I may. The reason Miss Van Horn is making this trip is because of her pioneering research with monatomic hydrogen. It enabled her to develop the first rocket fuel, powerful and concentrated enough to make this flight possible.
Smart, yeah, but nevertheless, she still ends up as the love interest of the male lead.
Now, don't get mad at me. But Can't you ever relax? All these weeks, months, I've been watching you. Nothing but work, work, work. Well, I've been wondering, how does a girl like you get mixed up in a thing like this in the first place?
I suppose you think that women should only cook and sew and bear children?
Isn't that enough? There's such a thing as going overboard in the other direction.
All right, settle down. In our next film, she's a world-renowned entomologist helping to explain an invasion of giant ants.
What are you made up for?
I'm going with you and Ben.
Oh, no, you're not.
Listen, Bob, someone with scientific knowledge has to go. My father's physically unable to do it. That leaves me.
That leaves you here. Now look, we don't know what we're going to find down there or what'll happen. And there's one thing for sure, it's no place for you or any other woman.
I didn't ask her to do it, Robert. She wanted to. And being a scientist myself, I couldn't very well forbid her.
A trained observer has to go into the nest.
What for?
There are more important things to find out than whether all the ants are dead. You wouldn't know what to look for.
Well, you tell us what to look for.
Look, Bob, there's no time to give you a fast course in insect pathology. So let's stop all the talk and get on with it.
Okay.
Don't worry, Dad.
So of course she has to fall in love with James Arness. My all-time favorite woman's role is in the next film. You're going to see a group of men who have to kill the monster, and it takes them a lot of doing to do it. We'll watch them kill the monster, and then we'll see what the woman's role was.
No, go ahead now.
The woman's work.
How's Dr. Camp? He's got a broken collarbone and a bad headache. Not getting enough voltage. I'll check the generator. Good.
Anybody want some coffee?
No, but you can give me.
All right. Okay, one of the next great themes of science fiction films in the 50s was alien invasion. And usually people describe this as a metaphor for the communist menace from the Soviet Union. The aliens can be good, they can be bad, and sometimes it's hard to tell the difference. Of course, you can tell the difference here because Klaatu in The Day the Earth Stood Still is good looking, so he must be the good one. And of course, the other one is the Thing. But sometimes the aliens look close enough to be almost human. And here are my two favorites with orange skin and impossible hairdos, almost creepily prescient of one of today's well-known politicians.
Why did you wait, Frank? You should have known. I was busy elsewhere. If you're so concerned, why don't you have to use the transformer?
The transformer is not the only answer.
Well, council differs. It says it's infallible.
The council is wrong. I told the monitors every day. The transformer is morally abhorrent to the subjects. It sets up subconscious blocks which defeat our very purposes.
You're being sentimental.
I am being practical. No, Greg. You use a machine to control a man's brain. You destroy his initiative. You destroy his power to help us as we need help.
Actually, the one on the right is the good one. He has the human qualities of sympathy, passion. The other one, not so much. Sometimes it takes an extraordinary human being to get beyond racial profiling. And by this, I mean profiling of what's human, the human race, to accept the aliens as fellow sentient creatures.
I've got to see you as you really are. Come out or I can't take the responsibility of protecting you.
Very well, then. You asked to see this, so you shall.
This was in 3D. facial characteristic to determine what's in an alien's heart. Here are 3 aliens, and actually it's the only one with one eye who turns out to be the good one. The take-home message of the next clip is pretty clear.
They're leaving tonight. They crashed here by mistake. Now they're fixing their ship to get out.
They can't get out. They're buried under tons of earth. Now take me to them.
I tell you, she's safe as long as you don't interfere.
Then why don't they come out in the open?
Because they don't trust us. Because what we don't understand, we want to destroy.
Yes, we are afraid of the other. In her brilliant essay on 1950s science fiction films, Susan Sontag writes about the imagination of disaster. With the advent of the atomic bomb, people in the 50s were really concerned about the possibility of destroying everything we knew. And science fiction gave us a metaphor to deal with this fear. We can see different examples. Here's an example of the actual destruction of the Earth.
But I'm frightened. As frightened as all those people would be if they knew. I haven't the courage to face the end of the world.
The planet Zyra will pass very close to us, close enough to influence the tides. Oceans will be torn from their depths. Tidal waves hundreds of feet high will sweep in from the coast. There will be giant earthquakes. Handfuls of people may survive if provisions are made.
We'll make them. Every possible effort. Whatever help my factories can give, we will give gladly.
It will be useless. Soon after, Belus will come into direct collision with the Earth. Our world will end.
Even more plausible, but sometimes it's the possibility that the Earth won't be destroyed, but it'll go on without us. In this case, it's the threat from those darn old giant ants.
But even the most minute of them have an instinct and talent for industry, social organization, and savagery that makes man look feeble by comparison.
How large were the ants you found?
Oh, the smallest measured 9 feet in body length. Unless these queens are located and destroyed before they've established thriving colonies and can produce, heaven alone knows how many more queen ants, man, as the dominant species of life on Earth, will probably be extinct.
One of the biggest questions posed by 1950s science fiction, and I think the one that finds its way into the sociology and philosophy classes, is this one. Are you your body? Are you your thoughts, your emotions? How much of you must change before you're no longer you? We have a few examples. Here's a father who starts off as a good man.
First there was this light, then it faded, then there was a humming noise.
Look, I tell you what we'll do the first thing when we get up. We'll go out and take a look. If there's any flying saucer out there, we'll notify General Mayberry. Now, how's that?
But...
In the morning.
Okay.
That's the fellow. Good night.
So Dad goes out to investigate what happened, and when he comes back, who is he?
George, you're safe. I was so worried.
What happened? I thought he'd gone to the planet.
Never mind, David. What did happen to you?
I stopped over to see Bill Wilson.
In your pajamas?
In my pajamas, obviously. Period.
Where's your other slipper?
I said period.
So other than a change in personality, is this really Dad?
Say, Dad, when you're out there, did you see anything?
Let's not start that flying saucer nonsense again.
Hey, Dad,
Now, what do you want?
what happened to your net? It looks like there's a
Nothing. I caught it on a barbed wire fence.
barbed wire, but there isn't any barbed wire between...
I caught it on barbed wire, I said!
So is this really another person pretending to be Dad? Or has Dad really changed? Aliens sometimes would take possession of humans.
Got a big date with Jane tonight, boss.
If you're thinking of getting off early, the answer is no. You gotta get married and settle down, George.
As soon as I find me a wife like yours.
You always say the right thing, don't you? Especially to the boss.
Was someone looking for a theremin today? Here it is. Don't worry, they're just borrowing a few bodies for a while.
George? Frank? Keep away. Whoever you are, whatever you are, I want to understand you. I want to help you. Then keep away. Keep away, John Putnam. We don't want to hurt you. You least of all. We don't want to hurt anyone.
How much of you must be changed before it's no longer you? Here a scientist has mixed up his body with an insect, and he's trying to put himself back together.
It has worked, hasn't it? You'll be all right now. I know it's
So which one is the real husband? The human body with the head of a fly, or the human head with the body of a fly? So all of these themes, women, children, alien invasion, the end of the earth, who are you? You're all in today's movie. You're not going to see them. You may have to intuit them, but they're all here in this one film. But before we watch the movie, I want to tell you just a little bit about the people who made the film. None of them, of course, knew they were making a classic. None of them had pretensions of making a classic. They just wanted to tell a good story, and they did it on a 3-week shoot. Walter Wanger, the producer, started in the film business in the days of silent films, and he had a reputation for being an intellectual. He liked European films. That's how they knew he was an intellectual. He was also a man of passion. In 1951, he shot his wife's agent on the presumption she was having an affair with him. She probably was. And at the time our film was made, he was in his 60s. And he continued to work for years after this. One of his last great films was the Elizabeth Taylor, Richard Burton, Cleopatra. This is Daniel Mannering, and he adapted the screenplay from a novel by Jack Finney entitled The Body Snatchers. It had actually started off as a 3-part series in Collier's. Today's movie has a similar plot, but a very different ending, and we'll talk about that after the film. There is some confusion about whether or not Mannering was blacklisted in the 50s, depending on what you read, but the fact that his name appears in the head of the film as the screenwriter means that he almost certainly was not, because if he'd been blacklisted, they wouldn't have used his name. We do know that he was a front for other blacklisted filmmakers to help them get their work done. We also know that he definitely did write today's film. The film was directed by Don Siegel. He was an old-timer when this film was shot. He had actually started off at Warner Brothers, and for those of you who've seen Casablanca, I can't imagine there's anyone here who hasn't. If you remember how the movie begins with the earth spinning and the story of the refugees leaving Europe and the route they took across the Horn of Africa, the Rim of Africa to Casablanca, Don Siegel made that part of the movie. That's how he got his start. He later went on to create the Dirty Harry series, so he knew a little bit about shooting kind of tough, black and white, film noir kind of films. The male star of this film is Kevin McCarthy, and he had already had a very distinguished stage and film career before starring in this film. He was one of the original founders of the Actors Studio in New York. He was the original Biff in the London production of Death of a Salesman, and he repeated that role in the film, actually winning a Golden Globe. And he went on to have a very distinguished career in hundreds of films and TVs and plays. Much to his consternation, it's his portrayal of Dr. Miles Bennell in this film for which he's remembered out of all that work. I should say best remembered. Dana Winter, the female lead, i.e. the love interest, was a British actress who had a successful career in England before moving to Hollywood in 1955, and her starring role in today's film was one of her first starring roles, and again, this is the film for which she's most remembered. There's another star of this film that I want to talk about, and a star that's not in the credits, but I think it's what gives this film kind of its air of authenticity, and which makes it so ordinary that it's even creepier. And what I'm talking about is the town of Santa Mira, the small town where this film takes place, with its fruit stands and its gas stations.
Len Perlman, Bill Bittner, Jim Clark and his wife Shirley and their kids. People I've known all my life.
The fact that something can go terribly wrong without monsters, without spaceships, without any apparent violence is what I think makes this film a classic. And it's so banal, the banality of the setting and the action contrasted with the terrible threat that we only slightly perceived is, you can see how quickly things go from backyard normal to weirdly unbalanced in the blink of an eye.
Well,
Hope you didn't forget the steaks.
I never forget anything.
Don't worry about him. He's completely housebroken.
I need a martini, Beck.
I need her on.
Doesn't matter. I want to pour it on the charcoal. I can't get this stuff to burn.
Oh, martini isn't dry enough. I'll get you something to start it. For drinking purposes. You're looking shipshape.
Thank you, sir.
What do you notice? The camera is tilted. And that's how they tell us that their world is about to change forever. So the best analogy, I've been thinking about, what does this film really mean? And the best analogy I came across, and I think this is true, is this film is like a Rorschach test. An ink blot, you can read into it whatever you want to. Is it a warning about creeping communism? Or is it a warning about creeping McCarthyism, the Joseph McCarthy kind? Is it about the dangers of conformism? Is it a parable of the loss of the soul? Is it a meditation on what makes us human? I think its message is as powerful today as it was 60 years ago, whatever that message might be. And now please enjoy Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Can you hear me? Yeah, just a few words and then we'll open it it up for discussion. In the original novel, The Body Snatchers, the pod people have a lifespan of 5 years. They don't have sex, they don't reproduce, and after they've taken over every human being, it looks like life on Earth will be wiped out, at least human life. Only the pod people did not figure with the strenuous rebellion of the human beings, and they finally give up and leave the Earth. Our film takes a slightly different turn. The original screenplay and the way it was shot, well, excuse me just a minute. We'll just put that on pause. None of the scenes in the hospital were shot. And there was no voiceover narration. It simply is a straightforward telling of what happened. So in the original movie, this is how it starts. He just comes home.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
An ordinary day in Santa Mira.
Doc!
Hiya, Sally.
Hi. Welcome home. I'm glad you're back.
How's Mickey and the baby?
Well, they're fine, but it seems that everybody else in San Diego needs a doctor.
No.
He's got an office full of patients.
Oh, no. On my first day back?
Well, some of them have been waiting for 2 weeks.
And here's the last scene in the film as it was shot. So when the executives at Allied Artists saw this, they worried that the film could be interpreted as just the psychological disintegration of a man of medicine into a raving lunatic. So they're the ones who insisted on the opening and the closing scenes in the hospital. Where Miles' first scene is crazy and then he's proved to be right. And even with these additions, they worried that the audience would be unhappy with such an ambiguous ending. There's no conquering the pod people, there's no going back to get Becky, there's no reassurance that the world will actually be saved. Fortunately, they showed it to a preview audience, and the preview audience had no trouble with the new ending, and thanks to that audience, we have the film we saw today. I hope you've enjoyed this last installment of Out of This World. I had fun putting it together. And if you've enjoyed it, I hope you'll continue to support Amherst Cinema. And if you're not, please become a member today. Thank you. And now if there's any questions? Yes?
Two things. Has it ever been seen in the original format without the extra parts?
The question is, has it ever been seen in the original format without the extra parts, the parts that is known as the Siegel version, based on Don Siegel? Not to my knowledge. However, when we arranged to show it here, I called George, who's the manager, and I said, please make sure I have the expanded version, just so I think you can experience the whole film. At least the whole film as it was presented in 1956.
To me, the extra parts are not the whole film. The whole film is without the extra parts.
The gentleman is saying that the whole film is without the extra parts. And there's a very good book called The Philosophy of Science Fiction Film. And there's an entire essay on this film in which the man argues that this really is just the mental disintegration of the doctor, that the pods do only exist in his mind, and that certainly could be one interpretation with or without the beginning and the end. Any other questions? Yes?
What was the movie-going public reaction to the film?
It was one of the most popular films of the year. It made money, and it was inducted into the National Film Registry. sometime in the 1990s. This is a film registry that's kept by the Library of Congress for films of scientific, cultural, or aesthetic significance. Yes?
Hi, Nina.
Hi, Barbara.
It's great. How's the new one different? I never saw the new one.
The new one, the one in 1978 with Donald Sutherland?
Yeah.
I had never seen it till last night. And I decided I really should watch this before I come in case someone asks me. It's very well reviewed. I could not get through the first 25 minutes. And the entire credit sequence in the beginning is nothing but special effects. Things growing on another planet and leaving that planet and going through space and landing on the Earth. And this is what I love about these 1950 science fiction films, that there are almost no special effects in this, except for all the soap bubbles and the weird pods. There's not, you have to imagine what's going on, and that's what I love. Someday I'll sit down and watch the other one all the way through. Okay, come on over. Yeah.
I've seen the 78 version. I saw it in the theater. It's basically the exact same movie, but updated. It's very well done. It's not quite as good as the original, but it's almost as good. You should see it.
So this gentleman is saying that he has seen that version. It's not quite as good as this one, but it's very well done.
I have to say, the reason they made an update is because the guy who wrote the original book wrote an updated version of the book.
Oh, yeah, he's saying that Jack Finney, who wrote the book, wrote an updated version of the book, and that's why they made the movie.
I read the book side by side. 75% of it is word for word the same. He just makes slight changes here and there to update it.
Yeah, that he just made slight changes. There are two people who play cameos in the updated version. In one scene, Kevin McCarthy is running through traffic going, you fools, they're after us, you're next." Also, Don Siegel plays a cameo role. And for any of you who are film buffs, do you remember when they're frightened by the meter reader coming out of the basement? That's Sam Peckinpah, who, very mild-mannered, sweet guy who went on to make some of the most violent movies anyone's ever made. Yes, Sarah.
So it seems, maybe this is my Rorschach test, but it seems so obvious that it's at least pointing in the direction of communism, and I wonder if people at the time saw that.
All of the question is, from Sarah's point of view, it's so obviously pointing in the direction of communism. From the point of view of the commies taking over, or okay, none of the filmmakers believed that. They all felt they were making a good story. Now, maybe subliminally, they thought that. On the other hand, remember that the screenwriter was actually helping blacklisted screenwriters, so it's unlikely that he would have put in an anti-communist message. And when in interviews later on with Kevin McCarthy and Don Siegel, all they said was the thing that really resonated with them was the concept of becoming a pod, of conformity, of losing your humanity, losing your soul, and that's what resonated with them. They deny that there was ever any idea of putting in a political message.
But that's what happened to you if you became a communist. You lost your soul.
You lost your soul and became a pod, and they obviously bought it then. Okay. We'll talk about that at dinner, right? Okay. Over there.
This is pretty trivial, but in the first film of the series, The Day the Earth Stood Still, that's Michael Rennie, isn't it?
It's Michael, he's asking if it's Michael Rennie in the first film of this series, The Day the Earth Stood Still, yes.
I asked because in the credits there's an actor whose last name is Rennie. I wonder if it was a relative.
In the credits there's an actor named Rennie. I haven't the vaguest idea.
It was right up there on the screen.
Nope, missed that. Nope, have no idea.
Did he have relatives who were in the business?
Michael Rennie, I don't know. We'll have to look him up in Wikipedia. I don't know. Any other thoughts, questions? Way in the back.
It seems like there's a lot of, pardon the pun, a seed for other
sci-fi movies, the first thing that came to my mind was Space Seed, which was a Star Trek episode where we were introduced to Khan. That's one thing. And the other thing, it reminded me like when a guy running wearing a suit reminded me about North by Northwest.
The comment is that it reminded her of scenes from other things. The episode Space Seed in Star Trek, where we're introduced to Khan. That's actually, I think, the second of the films rather than the TV series. And the other thing that it reminded you of
It wasn't a TV series. It was originally classic, and then they said
they brought Khan back for a return of Khan. That's right.
Series, and then it was Wrath of Khan, which was Star Trek 2.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I was a Trekkie. Okay. And the other thing is it reminded her of that wonderful scene in North by Northwest when Cary Grant is running through the cornfields in his suit being chased by the crop duster that's trying to kill him. One of the iconic scenes of all time. Any other comments? Yes, right there.
I know in the past too, and you mentioned it during your presentation before this, about the theremin. I thought of this last week, but didn't get the chance to ask it. I know it wasn't in the one today, but do you know or suppose if that is still, because that sound effect is still used today in all kinds of things, do you think they actually use a theremin or if it's just sound effect?
The question is, I had mentioned a theremin in both my first and second talks, and we actually had a theremin player here last week, and he wonders if the theremin is still being used for sound effects today. I'm going to guess no, because I can generate the sound of a theremin in my computer in about 2 seconds. However, there are people who play the theremin. I've spoken with a woman who fortunately or unfortunately, she could not come last week to play. That's why my friend Richard was kind enough to come and do it. So there's still people playing the theremin. Any other comments? Yes?
I noticed something at the end of this that I haven't noticed the last couple of times I saw it. They blew the extra ending. It made no sense for a pod person to run a red light. They should have had the other vehicle run the red light.
He's saying that there was some inconsistencies, that there should not have been a pod person running the red light. It should have been someone else. There are a ton of inconsistencies. I read an entire essay about the inconsistencies in this movie. Becky had an enormous transformation in about 45 seconds. Yeah. Where did her pod come from? Who put her? And, you know, you could pick it apart, but
she was already a pod person.
Oh, you think?
Pretending to be the.
Oh, you think she was just pretending? Yeah. Oh, that was a pretty good pretense. She learned how to kiss well before. Okay, go ahead.
This was when instant coffee was being invented. They had an Instapot.
This was when instant coffee was being invented. They had an Instapot. Did you also notice the posters? Oh, in the bar scene where they find the body, one of them is Miroir Now, Black Mirror. I mean, there's some interesting... People refer to this movie as a perfect combination of science fiction, horror, and film noir. And I think that's a pretty good summation. I think we're going to call it quits because I know they have to clear the theater and move in the next crowd. Thank you so much.